Hi. So today I want to talk to you about maintaining your house, why that's so important. And the reason is well, for all kinds of reasons, insurance reasons, the fact that you may want to sell it someday, and you don't want it to fall down around you. You want to keep the value up and maintain your equity and that sort of thing. Now, years ago, I couldn't afford to hire a contractor, so I did a lot of the work myself, and I did good work. But unfortunately, for instance, if I did a hot water tank, none of my hot water tanks ever failed, but if they did, the insurance company would say, well, who was the plumber that did this, And I would say, well, it was me. They'd say, well, are you a certified plumber? I'd say, no. But so, of course, my insurance would be null and void. Now, that comes to not just houses, but to vehicles and everything else I've owned, my boat, whatever. Maintenance is very important. It goes a long way. Now, what happened recently was my mother passed away, and I inherited my two sisters and myself inherited her estate. Now, a couple of years earlier, we had noticed with Mom's house. My sister had been living with my mom for the last 3 years of my mom's life, and we noticed that her windows were quite dirty. And I may have mentioned this one of my videos before. We thought it was just dirt, but it turned out it was a mold. And we discovered she had this mold issue in her windows, and they were starting to really rot away. And of course, you didn't want to bring it to Mom's attention because she got kind of defensive about her house not being clean and this kind of thing, and her eyesight was failing badly. She couldn't see it anyway. So eventually, we got her windows replaced, and they needed to be replaced. Had they been maintained properly, it's basically just by cleaning, there's a good chance this never would have happened as soon as it did. So, anyways, after my mom passed away, uh, we had discovered in her ensuite, my sister had been living in the master bedroom for 3 years. And in the ensuite, there was this big stain on the floor. And we tried to scrub it off, realized that it wasn't coming off, so it must have been something underneath. We decided to call a flooring company, and they said, well, we'll come out and have a look at it. But you might want to just peel back the linoleum and just have a look. So I did that. And I phoned them. They came out and had a look at it. And the lady's assessment was, wow, that's nasty. And it was. It was completely rotted right out. What had happened was the toilet seal had failed and it was slowly leaking. And it caused the wood around it to just, completely rot away. So I called in. They'd recommended a contractor. The contractor came in. And what happened was there's a crawl space right underneath the house. He went underneath there, and fortunately, it hadn't touched the floor joist. The rot wasn't even all the way through. It was just kind of like the top layer of this plywood. So we were able to deal with that. So the first thing he did was he cut that whole area out and treated some of the stain on top and that sort of thing. But fortunately, we got it before it hit the joist. Had it rot into the joist, that would have been a whole other issue. But what had happened really was it was just a slow leak. My sister was living there, said nothing about it. She should have spoke up, but just didn't say anything. And my mother, being very short-sighted and couldn't see anything, she had no idea about it, and this sort of thing. So it just got ignored basically. So we dealt with that, but that was such an important issue. It cost us a couple $1,000s to deal with this. And we got it done right. It was a very good contractor. He did it right. But nonetheless, it was something that had to be done. Now, had that seal been replaced earlier, that never would have happened. And if my sister spoke up earlier, now this toilet was probably the original toilet. Seal had probably never been changed the whole time that my mom lived there, and it was never an issue. So maybe at some point it should have been checked, but it wasn't. But anyways, the bottom line is, when my sister noticed that there was a stain forming, or even before that, she should have said something. But anyways, so that's the important thing is when it comes to maintaining your house, it's so important for all kinds of reasons. Another thing we noticed was up in the attic. We went up into the attic, and we noticed that the hood vent above the stove, the ducting had come away from the vent where it vents out. That had just come away. The clamp had failed. And fortunately, there was just a slight little bit of mold, which we treated with a spray type thing, and that dealt with that. See, that could have been worse too. And so obviously, it had not been off for that long. When the ducting came away, it hadn't been off for too long. And also, the fan itself was so gummed up, it wasn't even working anymore. The hood vent. My sister who lived there with my mom really didn't clean at all. You know, she should have been, and we just assumed she was, but she wasn't. And it was so gummed up the fan wouldn't even work anymore. So we dealt with that as well. So it's just these little issues. Now, I certainly can't fault my mom, who was very elderly. Like I said, it was me that noticed her windows were in really bad shape, and we had those replaced. Of course, she had a roof replaced too, because the insurance company was giving her a hard time about that, and rightly so. What's was due, you know. But everything else is fine. We're getting these things dealt with, but it's so important to maintain, you know, your house or your car or your boat or whatever, any kind of property you have. You need to maintain it for all kinds of reasons, and it's best to spend the money now before it gets worse, you know, because it's either pay me now or pay me later, that sort of thing. So I hope you found this helpful. Drop me a comment, and we'll see you next time. Okay, bye now.